Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank the International Federation for Family Development and the UN DESA Division for Inclusive Social for their partnership in organizing this event, and the permanent mission of the Republic of Slovenia to the United Nations for their collaboration. I especially thank Mr. Renata Kaplatsa and Mr. Zazu Furlan for honoring us today with their presence, as well as His Excellency of the Republic of Slovenia. Welcome. I also give my warmest welcome to all of you present here today, and to so many who are already following this event remotely. Our aim in organizing this event is to present some important insights about the role of family science in sustainable development, and how family scientists can contribute to creating full and productive employment and decent work for all, as a way of overcoming inequalities and accelerating the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Family science is a discipline that focuses on the challenges families face and how to help them better meet those challenges in order to improve their quality of life. Fortunately, a growing number of academic departments and degree programs in the United States and Canada are incorporating the term family science into their names. At least 165 of them currently use it. Through their work across many careers, family science scholars and professionals create a better understanding of families. They empower families to contribute to the well-being of their members and to become actual development agents. Their knowledge and expertise qualify these scholars in a wide variety of fields to better understand, strengthen, and empower families. These fields include family services, social services, early childhood education, university teaching, family science research, parenting education, youth programs, family therapy support services, mental health education, divorce mediation, abuse protection services, family policy analysis, child welfare advocacy, public health programs and services, NGO leadership, global family programs, international human rights advocacy, immigration and migration family services, program evaluation and assessment, and media and technology services. Today we will hear from an expert, Dr. Yusuf Vusovic, from Florida State University, who has studied adults' everyday work and family life. Dr. Vusovic will explain how negative experiences make an impact to produce poor health for both parents and children. And to show the diverse contribution of family science to social development, we will also hold an interactive discussion from students and professionals specializing in this field. Ladies and gentlemen, the International Federation for Family Development has been holding the IFFD briefing at the United Nations headquarters in New York during the session of the Commission for Social Development since 2013. This year, we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary, and we are proud to continue this tradition to bring the role of families to the Commission. Every year since 2013, my federation has presented the IFFD Awards to national, regional, or local governments in recognition of the promotion of family perspective policies, and to persons or private entities for their contribution to promoting family values. The awardees this year will be the government of the Republic of Slovenia and the Brazilian Instituto de Desenvolvimento Familiar, Checo Nishimura. My congratulations to both of them. I also give special welcome to Mr. Georgi Nishimura, President of the Instituto and Administrative Board Member of the JAPTO Group in Brazil. I also appreciate the presence of Dr. Sharifa Noaman Al-Emadi, Executive Director of Doha International Family Institute, one of the past awardees of IFFD Awards, for her contribution to this event. She leads the work done at the Doha International Family Institute as a crucial role in reaching their mission of strengthening the Arab family through research, policy, outreach, and advocacy at the national, regional, and international levels. There are many reasons to focus on the role of families and family policy in meeting the sustainable goals, primarily because the family is regarded as the natural an elementary unit of all modern societies, and also to pay particular attention to welfare policies affecting families around the globe. This social and political reality makes understanding the family's contribution to social progress and social development key to achieving those goals within the confines of existing public policy mechanisms. We hope that today's event will be a step, I say. We have our keynote speech by Professor Yusuf Vucevic. He's a professor of family and health sciences at Florida State University, and he will speak to us about how do family scientists make an impact. Dr. Vucevic, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I really can't explain how happy I am to be here. To be very honest with you, when I began my doctoral degree in human development and family sciences, it was sheer dumb luck, just to be perfectly honest with you. Next slide, please. This is where it began. What you would see on this slide, I'm sharing it with you for at least 3 or 4 different reasons, but this is my childhood home. And what I want for you to see in this is I want for you to notice, not that this is life in rural Wisconsin, lower in the lower right-hand corner, you can see where in the globe this place is actually located. But this is what real life working with families looks like, at least in some places, in some parts of rural America. And I would go so far as to say in various parts of the rural world, where neighborhoods are maybe a string of houses along a road. And sometimes there may not be a city for miles. And sometimes some people grow up not knowing that there's even the possibility to become something like an engineer, or a university faculty professor, or a doctor, or a nurse, but rather all we could think of is, I bale hay in the summer, I milk cows year-round, and I go hunting back in those woods over there every year. Next slide, please. So my overall goal for you here today, given that background and a little bit about who I am, is my goal is really to try to demonstrate the central value of family science for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide. And towards that, because everything I do is driven by goals and specific aims, over the course of the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to define for you what family science is and explain some of its distinctive characteristics. But more importantly, and the reason why I began with a personal story, is to link both conceptually and practically how family science contributes to or is a valuable part of the sustainable goals. Next slide. So the easy part, you find it on the web, right? Family science is the scientific study of families in close interpersonal relationships. And it's characterized by 5 main features. And I'm going to go through each of them in just a moment. But those 5 main features are that it's relationship focused, it's evidence-based, it's focused on preventing problems before they start, it presumes that every family, every unit, every community has strengths upon which to build, and it also takes an applied, or I would argue, translational approach. Next slide, please. So let's begin with those. First of all, family science is relationship focused. Now again, here's my home, but now I'm going to try to make things a little bit more conceptual for you. Please advance, there should be an animation coming in. Let's just pretend, just for a moment, that each one of those groups of faces reflects a family. So my family is down there on the left. I was one of 5, and I lived in a single family dwelling, and I was immediately adjacent to my great aunt and great uncle who were retired. So that's that small gray couple that you see in the lower right-hand corner. Just down the road, there was a farm that was owned by a mom, a dad, and an 8-year-old girl at the time. And they needed a lot of people, a lot of help to work on that farm. In between me and that family farm was a production farm. And so that's that middle spot with, there were some members of the family that were represented there. They're the blue smiley faces. But then they also had workers that worked for them. So those are the brown, frowny faces because, frankly, they didn't keep their workers particularly happy. They were more. Now, with my little visual, you can start to see what that means just a little bit, because that relationship focused is both among the individual members of any one of those families or any one of those entities. So in the case of the 5 smiley faces, my family as we grew up, but it's also the interactions of the families with each other, right? My aunt and uncle sold us the land that my parents built their house on. That family farm needed help, but they couldn't afford real workers, and so they looked for young strapping boys like me and my brothers to come and help them get their work done. So those families were connected, and that's an important part of the relationships that help build a community. Next animation, please. But that community, even though it was situated out there in a rural space, it was circumscribed by a faith community of one type or another. I was raised Catholic. There was a school system there that did its best to see to it that people were educated. There was some semblance of industry and commerce. Just next door, we had a very large potato manufacturing and output. And of course, there was governmental entities that went along with it. My point is that another part of being relationship focused is being able to understand the relationship of those individual families with those institutions, those social institutions that they make up and that surround them, and the very communities that they're a part of are actually part of the relationship. And notice all of that is in an ecosystem of one type or another. I was raised in the flatlands of central Wisconsin, and we were really good at growing potatoes. And so that was the #1 commercial crop of the area. Next slide, please. And so all of that provided the foundations for my graduate work, where I focused fundamentally on everyday work and family life. And so for those of you who study work and family, this view that came out during the COVID pandemic, that's probably the first thing that occurs to you. Busy mom trying to get work done, busy dad trying to get work done. All of a sudden, the children and everybody's working from home, and there's chaos everywhere. And that is everyday work and family life. And I've got 100 publications that will tell you that has implications for people's health. But it's more than that. Next slide, please. This is also work and family life. I do work with immigrant farm workers, and they take their children to the fields while they're harvesting, and that young girl is laying there with a bottle. Notice, not in a child care facility in any way, shape, or form, but rather laying in the field as she wishes, sucking on a bottle. Next slide, please. Or imagine this farm worker where a child is strapped to the back, right? Here we're trying to bring forward gender equality, and we're creating that through work opportunities, but yet those same mothers are still responsible for how those children turn out, because if something happens with that child, mom is ultimately responsible, because childcare is a mother's responsibility. Next slide. Children are working in the fields to help support family income. Next slide, please. And lastly, those children are also concerned. What you can't make out there is that's a little art depiction saying, I don't like to go to school because there's police officers there, and I'm afraid they're going to take mommy and daddy away. So all of this is work, family, and health. And what I want to convey to you over the course of the next 10 minutes is each of the features of family science is brought to bear on not only my program of research, which I'm trying to illustrate to you in ways that presumably are going to connect with the various organizations that you represent, but all of family science. So that leads us then to the next slide. So family science is also characterized by the fact that it's evidence-based. And this pile of data is my attempt to say, see, I'm a scientist. That's the most you're going to get to data today. But the point is that we use evidence to try to inform decisions. And what this data is showing is it's from a study that was done in the Salinas Valley of California called the Chamaco study. And if you could see the data, again, the data aren't the important thing, but if you could see the data, what it basically shows you is that it is in utero, both 13 weeks post-conception, and then 6 months post-conception. Relative to babies in the general US population, children in farm worker families have elevated rates of pesticides already circulating in their systems. That's the point of this slide. Next slide. So because there's this thing that we call evidence-based, we've got these things, we think maybe pesticides are not a good thing for children, especially when it's circulating in their bloodstreams, even when they're still in mama's womb. We said we need a strategy to begin addressing para-occupational exposure to pesticides. And so my colleagues and I developed what we refer to as La Familia Casa y Campo, which is essentially a para-occupational exposure pesticide mitigation program. Now, I'm giving this to you as an example, not of something that everybody should run out towards, but again, to illustrate the point that family science takes a strengths orientation. And the whole orientation that's behind Casa y Campo is we want to strengthen families in their ability to protect their children in the communities that they're a part of. So we use community health workers. We train community health workers, oftentimes who have less than a high school education, to deliver and disseminate this information to families. And a comprehensive evaluation of this program illustrates that people were able to pick up people, meaning the family members themselves, receive the messages, change their behavior so that their children were more protected from pesticides in the home. Next slide, please. Family science is also translational. That means we just don't do science for the sake of doing science. We want to be able to translate that work into concrete, actionable steps. And again, this slide just illustrates what that looks like. How do you take a complex idea like pesticide exposure and convey that to somebody who maybe has a 6th grade education in their home country? How do you do that? Well, it's simple. You break it down to the core messages and you communicate with families in the message and in the manner that's best suited for them. Because at the end of the day, pesticide exposure is something that people, at least in the farm worker community, carry home on their clothes. So things that I take for granted on any given day. I come home from work, I give my daughter a hug. I've just transferred pesticides from my occupation to my child in terms of that simple embrace. And so we provide concrete strategies on how you can help protect your child. But the parallel in other parts of my world is when I did classic white middle class work and family research, is we went to the White House for the White House Forum on Workplace Flexibility. We pursued Workplace Flexibility 2010 to try to see to it that people had flexibility in their workplace. All of those are examples of translational science that was driven by family science. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, please hit the 2 animations. It's all about prevention. These are the things that we're trying to prevent. In southern Florida, no more than 7 years ago, there was a series of birth deformities as a result of inappropriate pesticide use in the large-scale agricultural operations in the region. Next slide, please. Data from the Chamaco study tells us that 4-year-olds who were exposed to pesticides while they're in utero, that's how they draw stick figures on the right-hand side of that figure. Your children, perhaps on the left-hand side, can actually start to shape stick figures in a way that almost looks like people. And so at the end of the day, all of this science is not, oh golly, I wonder about the hazards of pesticides, or I wonder how we can make life a better place. But we're trying to prevent very real problems that are necessary. We need pesticides to help facilitate some of the work of global food supply. But we also need for that work to be done and to not have that to be carried by the burden of the people who are harvesting those crops or planting those crops, or in some areas of the world where they're actually doing the work themselves as part of the family farm. So that's how, this is my attempt to try to illustrate how the principles of family science, what they look like, how we apply them, and how I've done it in some of my program of research. And so that leads us then to some of the next steps. Next slide, please. So again, at the end of the day, family science is the scientific study of families' close interpersonal relationships. It's relationship focused, but it's not just focusing on how much husband loves wife or how mom looks after child. It's the relationship among individuals in the family, among different families in a close geographic unit, and it's the relationships among the social institutions and the very services that you folks provide. All of that is part of the relationship focus. It's built off evidence intended to be translated and applied in a very concrete fashion so that we're able to build strengths and capacity in local communities to prevent problems. Now, next slide. Now, here's me. I'm doing my work in Florida State University. But what does that look like if one idea starts to spread? Next slide, please. Maybe other people take those ideas and they start putting them to work. Maybe they're surrounding pesticides. Maybe they're around flexible work arrangements. Maybe they're around alternative arrangements for achieving education for young children. I was just giving you my examples. But now imagine we follow something similar to that and we put it to work in various places. And then next slide, over time. And then over time, next slide, we start adding in, we start adding in new ideas. And then next slide, we start realizing that family science was the very foundation for being able to facilitate action and sustainable development of goals that meet the needs of children and families around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vucevic. There are a few minutes available for questions. Do you have any questions for Dr. Vucevic? Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. And I recall.
Press the button.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. And I recall your excellent contribution to the research in Qatar on work-family balance. And my question is that because you have this research from different regions with different contexts, how do you see the commonalities in work-family balance as a challenge, as the support the policies can play a role to families within different contexts? Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent question. I see in the world of work and family that there's far more commonality than there is difference. The places where there are difference, and I sort of characterized it when I visited Qatar a few years ago, is where are we on the spectrum of developing solutions for helping working parents, especially working moms. I explained to folks in Qatar when I was there that in some ways Qatar, at least right now, is about where the United States was in the 1970s. That is, relatively few families had working models for having dual working parents, right? So the United States started in the 1970s, and now my parents were dual learner couples. Me and my wife are a dual learner couple. We've got a couple generations of how do you actually do life with raising children and balancing careers. Other parts of the world, though, don't have that working model. And in some cases, and sadly I don't remember if it's the case in Qatar, but the world that some of you are better aware of than I, where the goal is to hang on to as much tradition as possible while also marching straight into a global economy. Sometimes those don't work together. And so therefore, seeing to it that we march into a global economy and we keep the best parts of our tradition, but also recognizing that somebody's going to bear the brunt of maintaining those traditions, and to see to it that there are supports that are in place. That's where I see the main difference sort of globally in terms of work and family. Further beyond that, though, and it's part of the reason why I took the approach that I did here in my presentation, is frankly because it dominates so much of the news. It's easy to think about work and family in terms of the corporate mother, the corporate father. But the person working the farm in rural Africa or in rural India or rural South America, they've got the very same work-family challenges. They look incredibly different. They still need support for where are children going to be kept safe, where are children going to have the opportunity to learn about their worlds around them to be successful, but yet at the same time, they're getting virtually no attention in the work and family space. And so quite honestly, that's why I wanted to balance this very different view of work and family, because otherwise we get caught up in the global urban enterprise, and that's important. I'm not suggesting it's not important. But the vast majority of the world lives in rural places, and they've got similar challenges. They're not that different, but they do require different solutions along similar.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Dr. Kusevich. Time for one more question? Yes. You have the floor. Turn on your mic, please.
The presentation, I would like to understand how the understanding of family science is going to affect the achievement of the sustainable development goals. Looking at the discussions and also the examples that you've given, basically.
I'm sorry, I did not catch the whole question.
Another question, they made a comment that if you understand the whole family science, the way you have explained the family science, how do you think they're going to affect the achievement of the sustainable development goals, SDGs?
Thank you. Now I believe.
The sustainable development goals, SDGs.
Thank you. Now I believe I understand the question.
Sorry, can you introduce yourself? Thank you.
So once again, I'm still explaining my life from Malawi.
So I wish I had a really good answer for you, but I'm gonna make up two right now. And they're not really made up, but I'm going to articulate them in a stage-wise fashion. The first way that I'm gonna set it up is quite honestly, for the young people in the room, I'm hoping that this helps you see that maybe family science is even more than what you ever thought it was before, right? Because again, we tend to get focused on, does mom love dad, or do children or siblings fight with one another, and how do we create new intimate unions? And that is critical. I'm not suggesting that that is not important. But as important as the relationships with other systems that those families are embedded in, because those families are not an entity unto themselves. And so one way of achieving the UN goals, in my view, is to help expand the purview of what family science can be in terms of the topics that are discussed, the science that's undertaken, the family context that work is done in, because it all is family science. But then secondarily, and here I'm going to actually defer to my dear friend Bahira here and say, there's people who've been pressing this issue for much longer than I have. They've got a much better worldview in terms of how can family science advance the sustainability, the developmental sustainability goals. They've been thinking about this much longer. And my hope, quite frankly, is by seeing it again, a different perspective on the different routes that family science can take in very different domains that have utility across the globe. I'm hoping that that will be part of the solution.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kusevich. That concludes the keynote remarks. We will move on to the interactive discussion with family science, young scholars, and practitioners. For that, I introduce the moderator, Carlota Nalda, who has a degree in international relations from the University of Rey Juan Carlos in Madrid. Carlota, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nora. To facilitate, I would like to remember our speakers that you have 5 minutes to talk, and I will let you know when you have 1 minute to wrap. So first, we'll hear from Francisca Teteri, graduate teaching assistant at Kansas State University, and Bachelor of Science in Family and Consumer Science at the University of Ghana. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. So my name is Francis Carlos Devi, and I'm originally from Ghana, so I'm Ghanaian from West Africa. So I came to the US in 2021 to pursue my master's in family science, which is at Kansas State University. So interested, I have a story. When I was growing up, I wanted to work in the health sector because I was interested in helping people. And I thought the only option was to go into careers that everyone knows as health professionals or education and stuff like that. Then, unfortunately, I didn't make it to nursing school, so I got into family science. And I was like, what is family science? And through that program, I was able to get to know myself better, understand my family situation. So I'm from a separated family. In Ghana, divorce and separation is very common, but it's discriminated. People don't talk about it. So when you are from such family, people think that's the end of your life and nothing good is going to come out of you. But from that experience, I got to being part of the program, I learned about child development, early childhood experiences and its impact on development, and also knowing that there are parenting strategies, there are things that you can do. It's not the end. You can still, something good can come out of you as a person. And also, what ways can we improve society? What ways can we educate people to better understand that even if relationships are dysfunctional, or even if there's a breaking relationship, there's still some strategies that we can put in to support these communities, because they are the generation, they are the ones that make the impact in our society. And that's where I came into applied family science in Kansas State, because I wanted to support divorced families in Ghana and also be able to contribute to West African populations, because divorce, since Ghana is part of West Africa, then it's the same issue under the ground. And through applied family science at Kansas State, I got to learn about program evaluation, program implementation. I also learned about resilience in families. So as Dr. Joseph mentioned, so we look at family from a broader system, an ecological system. We learn about the microsystems, we learn about the mesosystems, the exosystem that it talks about. I know I'm using big words here, but it just helps us to understand that the individual is not on their own. It's not like you're individualistic or independent. Things around you influence who you are. So we can, if we want to solve the world's issue, if we want to achieve the sustainable development, if we want to address inequalities that are around, then we have to start from understand the relationships that exist in the families and how these societies impact families. And through that, we'll be able to achieve this goal. And through family science as well, through my research interest now, I'm looking at children from divorced families, their experience during the pandemic. I know we have divorce education programs that help teach parent strategies. So this is what you do in case we are going to transition, your children are under stress, we know the outcomes of divorce. How can we support these things? These programs are in place. But with COVID affecting a lot of the legal systems, which they usually rely on for agreement on parenting, housing, all these systems were impacted. You couldn't have your family to support you as well. So all these systems being impacted, I want to understand how did they adapt. Did this program still stay effective during the pandemic? And through that, I'll be able to identify what worked, what failed, and what strategies that we can put in place going forward. So there are so many things family science can do. They help us to see the inequalities that exist in society, and as well, it better prepare us and position ourselves for the future as well. So this is, I know it's a lot of information that I shared, but I want to say family science is very practical and there's a lot of things. It's not just for marriage, relationships. There's so much you can do with being in family science. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We really appreciate. Now we'll hear from Abigail Stefan, postdoctoral fellow visitor for Educated Aging College of Behavioral, Social, and Health Science, Clemson University. Abigail, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm used to teaching undergraduate students, and sometimes they need a little bit of extra engagement. So I don't think that's the case here, but I'd still like to start with a bit of an interactive question. So by a show of hands, how many of you had a grandparent throughout your life who cooked you a meal, stayed with your family, perhaps lived with your family? Okay, great. So that's a lot of people. So I don't have to convince you all of the important role that grandparents play within families' lives. I'll do a little bit of that, but then I'll talk more about how family science can be used to leverage the contributions of grandparents. Next slide. So in my research, I focus on intergenerational relationships in families and their impact on individual and familial health, well-being, and development. So I'm interested in looking at how these relationships function as resources and how to strengthen them to improve outcomes for individuals across the entire lifespan. So one aspect of maintaining health and well-being in middle and older adulthood is through meaningful engagement and contributing to something that's greater than yourself. Next slide. Next slide, please. Sorry. So the contributions provided by grandparents or grandparent labor can occur within the family, next slide, or outside of the family. Next slide. And so the things that can happen within the family are caregiving, similar to what I had you raise your hand to indicate, but there are also important contributions that grandparents have outside of the family, such as volunteering or engaging in formal employment. Next slide. So grandparents' labor in and out of the family context can be a source of fulfillment, but it can also be a source of stress. And these contributions often go unrecognized and unrewarded in society due to grandparents' potential invisibility and the prevalence of ageist employment practices. So further, the shape and structure of grandparents' engagement is often dictated by their circumstances, which vary greatly across the socio-demographically diverse grandparent population. So thus, needs and opportunities vary greatly. So taking that into consideration and understanding that these contributions may look different, how can we evaluate the needs and create effective solutions for grandparents? Next slide. So by applying a family science lens, we see that grandparents all have one very important thing in common. Their role is inherently relational, and this is because they are embedded within a family system. In order to be a grandparent, you have to have a grandchild. That's one of the qualification criteria. And so this is really a strength of the grandparent role, is that it is embedded within this family system. Next slide. So using a family systems-oriented perspective, we see that grandparents must balance their labor across multiple contexts, both within the home with their family commitments and also outside of the home in volunteering positions or informal employment. So effective balancing to better health and well-being for grandparents, as it allows them to budget their time and energy to optimize engagement in meaningful labor pursuits. Next slide. And because of these systemic connections, which has seemed to be a through line in all of our conversations so far today, the health and well-being of grandparents positively impacts the health and well-being of other family members, such as children and parents, which lead to healthier and stronger families, which leads to healthier and stronger communities, which leads to healthier and stronger societies as a whole. And it's cyclical. Healthier and stronger societies lead to healthier individuals, and it just feeds back into itself. Okay, next slide. So with that, I'd like to challenge you all to consider how your nation recognizes and rewards the contributions of grandparents. And I'd like to finally close with some recommendations. Next slide. And so these recommendations are to better meet the needs of grandparents who are providing informal and formal labor to families. So these 3 points align with OECD and World Health Organization recommendations, and they emphasize the need for flexibility, balance, or integration, and fair compensation. So one suggestion I'd like to highlight today is related to compensation, or number 3 on the screen. So in my own research and from other studies in this field, we've learned that grandparents would benefit greatly from being compensated, not necessarily monetarily, but through educational resources and other supports that help inform their practice as grandparents. So these resources could mirror parent education courses or other educational parenting materials. In intergenerational relationships, allowing them to reach their full potential as valuable resources for families in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Now, I would like to introduce Virginia Hernandez, Government Secretary of the State of Querétaro, and Bachelor of Laws Tecnológico of Monterrey.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the IFD and the UN DESA for their kind invitation. Next slide. In Querétaro, we are convinced that the best public policy is one that promotes economic growth, and the best family and social policy is job creation. Since 2011, the Secretary of Youth of the State of Querétaro has sought, through youth-oriented public policies, strong contributions to local development, and in parallel, promoting global impact in accordance with the State Development Plan and the Program for Full Development of Youth. I'm aware of the responsibility involved in speaking to you on behalf of the state of Querétaro and Mexico about the work we have done to champion family development, not as a means to be overlooked, but as a necessary goal for a prosperous society. In 2020, we faced one of the most challenging situations of the last decade. For many families, the COVID-19 pandemic brought economic and labor instability, which represented a major problem for individual and collective prosperity efforts. Since then, one of the biggest challenges has been to ensure access to a decent job for young people. By doing so, we provide tools to overcome inequalities and strengthen full development of youth. In the specific case of Mexico, the scenario left by this health emergency was not very encouraging. By 2022, roughly 31% of youth, people aged from 12 to 29, according to state of law, were identified as not economically active and available. That means they do not perform and seek any economic opportunities to enter the labor market. And at the state level, the pandemic raised the informality rates of this segment of the population by 23%. In the face of this alarming context, hand in hand through our governor's leadership, we have worked to provide more and better opportunities, taking into consideration the 2030 agenda as the referential umbrella to leave no one behind. Among these actions, Job Fairs link youth with national and international recognized companies such as Safran, Samsung, Harvard, Harman, and Nasdaq Group, trade trainings, technology skills, workshops, diplomas, language courses, the creation of a job bank, as well as seed capital and training for young entrepreneurs. All of these efforts, according to data collected by the Federal Labor Secretariat, have allowed us to reduce informality by 10% in the case of young people in our state. I would like to share with you 3 good practices that impact directly or indirectly in family policy. From the Economic Development Department of the Secretary of Youth in 2022, we hosted 10 employment fairs, 23 workshops to develop technical knowledge, digital and technological abilities, 4 English courses, and a job pool where 634 CVs were received. Additionally, in collaboration with the Federal Labor Secretary, we received 1,800 attendees, resulting in 545 young people hired in national and international companies. Another good practice for public policy is the the 2030 Ambassador Program, where throughout the last 4 years we have been counseling and promoting the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development through technical and financial sponsorship of social entrepreneurship projects for more than 40 young people. This public policy promotes economic inclusion as a means to family. Our governor, Mauricio Curi, since the beginning of this administration, has strongly encouraged members of his cabinet, including myself, to not only implement efficient public policy throughout rigorous interdisciplinary methodology, but to do so with heart wide open. Since the beginning of the mandate, we shared his fundamental ideology on development. Only through decent work can prosperity bloom. Key stakeholders from all sectors need to work together. You can count on the Secretary of Youth and the government of Querétaro to advocate for a better future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. And thank you all three speakers for your contributions in this interactive panel. And now I open the floor for questions for the audience.
So, thank you for this very beautiful set of presentation. I have a question. One of the major challenges, what I see with families today, I see two interrelated challenges. One is that there is a generational divide, which is that it seems like different generations are living in different planets in terms of value systems, in terms of life experiences, right? And related to that, I think I see that the spaces that used to exist for family members to talk to each other, to be able to arrive at common understanding, to make decisions which are consultative and not dictatorial. So my question is, what is the experience on that? How are we navigating as we go into a world which is becoming increasingly complex, especially in societies which are already in transition, transforming culturally, economically. Different generations are at different paces. The younger ones are moving much faster. What's happening within the home? You see, that's the question. How are they still able to stay as one unit? How do they think together as one unit? I don't know if there's any experience or any. How do they make decisions? There's this whole question of gender, which I didn't see much addressed. Between generations, for example, when you talk of grandparents, how does the gender, how are the changing gender norms talked about, resolved? So I just wanted to see the experience.
I think we can take two more questions in a row, and then maybe you can answer them.
Anyone else have a question? Yes, in the back.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Shepard at the Baha'i International Community United Nations Office. Thanks to all of the speakers for the thoughts so far. It seems like in many societies around the world, the nature or perhaps even definition of what a family is sort of under discussion. And I'm curious either people's thoughts or if there's, it's been, like research has been done around I don't know, just the roles of defining family as, a nuclear family versus a blood family versus sort of wider, more open conceptions of family, and just what are the kind of outcomes of conceptualizing it in different ways. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. In the back.
Thank you. I'm Eve Sullivan, Parents Forum. I wonder where in all of this the question of parenting education, my favorite topic, fits, and how we address the changing norms of what parenting involves, and of course the gender aspect. But primarily I'd like to ask any of the speakers to comment on the stigma against it. Who's going to tell me how to raise my kids? And in fact, we all need to learn new things from time to time. Thank you.
I'm happy to go ahead and get things started. So I'll try to remember all of the questions and address each one in turn. So I think with the generational divide, I think it's very valid and very important. What we know is that the best way to maintain close relationships is to continuously have conversations, and generations can learn more about each other from that engagement. And so part of it too, why family science, we're advocating for more engagement there and more family scientists, is so that we can learn more about best practices and ways to do that effectively. So I think we're always learning, and a similar answer for the gender roles. I think part of it is learning how to do that. I will say in my dissertation research, one of the really interesting findings from that was the grandparents in my sample really expressed an interest in wanting to take on more of a relational role and help build their grandchildren's emotional intelligence, because they felt like that wasn't something that they received from their grandparents, or that was even an acceptable have emotions, have feelings. And so that was a really interesting and unexpected finding. And I think as culture continues to shift and change, it's more acceptable for men to have feelings and have emotion and build up that capacity. We'll continue to see that. As far as defining family, I think that's also very valid. And I was in several rooms at the recent conference on family science where we were asking those same questions. You know, what are the boundaries of a family? Is it who lives in the household? Is it the connections and the network there that makes up a family? And so it's still evolving. The best definition, though, is the one that was shared at the beginning of the presentation that is endorsed by the National Council on Family. Answer your other question, there is absolutely a field of research that looks at diverse family systems, the single parent families, blended families, same-sex couples, or families, adopted families. Something that I focus on with my interest in grandparents and grandparent-grandchild relationships is what we call grand families, or those that are headed by a grandparent who provides primary care to their grandchildren. Which, with the rise in opioid and incarceration and other issues, there are more and more grandparents who are finding themselves in that situation where they're acting as a custodial figure to their grandchildren. And so I think there's a lot of new work that's emerging in this area, looking at, okay, if there's not a mom and a dad in the picture, what does that look like? There's still absolutely a family, but it may impact some of the functional outcomes that we see.
I'd like to chime in on a couple of the points that were made, because they're exceptional points. Part of my side job, I'm a deputy editor for Council on Family Relations primary journal. So I see, last year I saw 500 journal articles on some aspect of family life. And one thing that I can state with a fair amount of confidence, at least based on that N of 500 observations, is sometimes the things that we see in, at least that I see on the news and going through my news feeds, isn't showing up the same way in people's daily lives. You're right, there is a generational shift of one kind or another, but in individual families, it's not navigated in as vitriolic of a way as what it appears to be taking place both in popular culture and on the news waves. people want to know what's going on with grandma, or why does grandpa treat me that way, right? That doesn't grandpa understand? And then the comeback is, well, grandpa understands, but grandpa also is interested in what's maybe in your best interest, right? And those things get navigated in a way that isn't nearly as, let's just simply say, sensational as what it might appear. I really want to speak to the point about family because, and I'm sorry if I'm going to, the definition of family, and I'm sorry if this is going to bore a few folks, but I have to say it. Family science is a discipline that we like to claim we're almost 100 years old, but at best we're maybe 50 years old. And the way we've thought about family was deeply steeped in an asyncratic period of time, that is the 1950s. Do we really think families today are that different? If you were to read first generation Roman Empire, there were homosexual families that were prominent throughout. Do we really think that there was never high rates of single parent familyhood? What about the plagues? What about during wartime when whole generations of children were raised without a father figure? So again, we like to think that family is so different today, but it's only because the contrast has been to 1950. But if we take a look at time throughout millennia, there's always been the notion that family are individuals connected by household, blood, or some kind of legal affinity. And sometimes that legal affinity is ceremonial through the church. Sometimes it's not. Family came into existence in the 1700s, and it was originally defined as a household, which included the slaves. At least that's where it comes in terms of the Roman Empire. So we really need to stop breaking out of this idea of, oh, family is so different today than what it has, because it's not. We're just perpetuating a myth if we say that family is so different today than what it was throughout history, because that is not true. And a good family scientist will call bluff, because it's not really that different. Things have made it different. Technology has made it different. How do we deal with blood lineage now that we've got sperm and egg donor banks? Those are very important legal and ethical questions, but it's not really throwing family into consideration. So I just really would encourage folks to help think soundly about the things that we're taking in from the news media and various other sources, and ask ourselves, is that true?
So just to add something to the generational divide, I think because society has changed over time, we've focused on what is changing and left back our culture and all these things. But I think if we go back to really see what our culture looks like, or the values that we have, the existing values we have, we really understand that the family is based on relationships and not necessarily the definitions or the categories that we have created. Because if we continuously stick with the categories, then we'll create more inequalities. We'll get to a point where some policies will just focus on the categories that you have created and say, because you are not part of this category, we can't say this to your family because we don't count you as a family. And also, I think getting to know the community you are working with is a great thing, and also having conversations. We do research. The research is supposed to help us to know the people we are serving, the people we are working with. So, and I think that's the key thing. And also for the parenting education program, I think for parenting education program, we really have to understand the culture. I will emphasize on that because they are the things they've been doing for some time. We can test those things and see how these things are impacting. These things have been helping society, have been helping children for some time now. So just to give an example, in Ghana, I know we are collectivists, we are family oriented, and so if you have a research that is focused on individualistic families, then you can use those evidence to support people of the different culture. So culture plays a big role in understanding the beliefs and traditions these families have had and has been helping them for some time. And through that, we'll be able to really understand how we can best save them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very enlightening discussion. We are going to move on to the award ceremony portion of our program. And I'd like to call up Dr. Sharifa Nomani, who will introduce the award for the Instituto de Desenvolvimiento Familiar Chico Nishimura. Dr. Sharifa has a PhD in psychology and counseling. She's the executive director of Doha International Family Institute, and she's a former recipient of the IFFD Award. Dr. Sharifa Nolan, you've got the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to begin by thanking the International Federation for Family Development, IFFD, for organizing this important meeting on the topic of the role of the family science in sustainable development, how family science challenges are helping to overcome inequalities, accelerating the recovery from the pandemic and fully implement the 2030 agenda. Since 2013, IFFD have presented this award to persons of entities organized for the promotion of family perspective policies during the past year and for this appreciation of promotion of family values around the world. In 2018, he was awarded the IFFD Family Commission for our contribution to family issues through discrimination. Today, I'm happy to be invited to present this year's award to the Chico Nishimura Family Development Institution. The first 2020 IFFD Family Award is now presented to Chico Nishimura Family Development Institute. The institute is a non-profit organization founded in April 2017 to serve J2 group employees and their families, as well as the ecosystem and the local community. The group is now present in more than 100 countries with high technology, and innovation solutions for the agriculture, while the institute highlighted the importance of the family as an agent for the corporate social responsibility and strategic foundation for sustainable growth. The International Board of the International Federation for Family Development has decided that the Chico Nishimura Family Development Institute should be granted one of the 2023 IFFD Family Award for the quality of its education programs offered to help family members to achieve excellence in building strong families and empower them to fulfill their important social role. Congratulations, Shumera, sorry, I lost the name like that. Family Development Institute, Mr. George Nishimura, President of the Institute and Administrative Board Member, Dr. Guru Mazi.
Thank you very much for the words. And I
Try to be in 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, the word sexual is not enough to express my feeling about the meaningful moment that I'm having. Let me express the other way, or the same way, but reinforcing what I am feeling here. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry if I some better word than thank you, but it's not easy. I am so glad, and also our team in Brazil, and this is an honor for us from the Institute of Development, Geoculture and Development, to receive the 2023 IFFD Award. Let me introduce my daughter, Melissa. Melissa is here with me, and she lives in the States. Please stand up just a moment. Yeah. She lived in the States for so many years. And but I'm going to present her because she was a little girl, 7 years of age, when my wife and I started a ministry to help families in Brazil. For more than 30 years, for more than 35 years that we are working to spread families in Brazil. We are dedicating this to health. And this is part of my work because I was chairman of the company, and this is a lot of work also. But also we always dedicate our part of our lives to strengthen marriage and families. 2015, we create another non-profit organization. It's called Instituto de Desenvolvimento Familiar Diego Nishimura. Diego Nishimura was my mother. And you know, when we talk about family, we need to talk about honor. We need to talk about respect. And this was the way that as children of a great woman, a great mother, we decided to honor my mother, giving the name of this institute, and to really to remember who he was. Wonderful name. And we created the institute with the purpose. We created the institute to strengthen the families from our employees. We have a company. We are a family business company. And I was working for a family so many years, and then I saw that we are not reaching for the people in the company. The reason or some other things that we look also per year. And then we created this organization with the purpose, very clear purpose. We want to teach principles to strengthen the family of the employees. Because we have a belief in our family. We have a belief that a strong family business only will be happiness, when you have strong families, not only our families, but the employees' families too. You know, if we believe we have this clear belief, we have strong families in the company, then I think that the company is stronger. This is, I think that's very clear to understand for the people that we serve our family. Today, we start to see that was a good work that we are doing. And we decide to open this for all the community. Community is welcome to come and to receive teachings, seminars, courses, everything that we have for families. We we invite now the community. It's open for the community to come. And we talk actual values. We help also about the young people, especially the young people, to prepare for the work. And we try to, I have this idea to, okay, we need to raise the potential of our people. And this is what we are offering, some tools to make these people higher potential. So far, we have accumulated since we started in 2015. 2017 was when we formally organized, but we started working in 2015, and we have reached about 12,000 registration, 12,000 registration in a small town of 22,000 people. This not means that it's 12,000 people. It's less because there are people that are doing 2, 3, 4 different courses. But I think that we reached so far about 20% of the population of Slovenia with the one of the problem that we have there. And I believe that if we carry on doing this faithfully, to persevere, it is possible that the city will be different in 20 years from now. I have this feeling that it's possible, and we are working for that. We want to have really a very good small town in Brazil. And I think that part of this challenge is really make our families stronger. I mean, there are many ways, but we are focusing to make our families stronger. Therefore, thank you very much for all of you that we are receiving this award. I was not expecting because I live in a small town. Our organization is not so well known, but now it's becoming well known worldwide. Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much. And I finalize saying this. May our God protect and bless us and our families. Thank you very much.
I will be presenting the award to the government of Slovenia. Slovenia ranks among the top countries in the world for generosity to their parents. Mothers and fathers are entitled to 130 days of parental leave each. Parental leave is extended in the event of birth of twins or more children at the same time, or a premature child, or one who needs special care. The amount of parental benefit is equal to 100% of the basis and may not be more than 2.5 times the amount of average monthly wage. More flexible forms of work, including the right to breastfeeding breaks, also contribute to facilitating the reconciliation of professional and family obligations. So the International Board of the International Federation for Family Development has decided that the government of the Republic of Slovenia should be granted one of the 2023 IFFD Family Awards for their family support programs targeted to reduce social inequalities, strengthen the position of vulnerable families, and contribute to the greater social inclusion of families and individuals on a long-term, free of charge, and widely accessible framework. We congratulate the Republic of Slovenia. Congratulations. The government of the Republic of Slovenia, Mr. Saso Furlan, Ministry of Labor, Family, Social Affairs, and Equal Opportunities of Slovenia, to accept the award. Mr. Furlan, you may take the floor for some words.
A very good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank the jury members for selecting Slovenia for the 2023 great honor to be here at this special event, receiving this award. I'm also pleased to have this opportunity to share with you some experiences and good practices from Slovenia. And let me say that family policy in Slovenia is based on an integral and inclusive approach, which means that it includes different various types of families, respects the autonomy of the family and individuality of its members, protects children's rights in the family and beyond, and places emphasis on the social security of families. So family policy is thus integrated into a wider system of social welfare directed to reduce social inequalities, to curtail poverty. So the main policies that were already mentioned, the scheme of paid parental leaves, including paid sick leave, numerous financial benefits for families, and widely accessible system of good quality childcare ranks to be among the top countries in the world for generosity to the new parents. So our country was the first European country to introduce one-year parental leave in 1986, and for a long time also the only country providing 100% wage compensation for such leave. Then childcare services are of great importance in supporting the employment of parents, especially mothers. Full-day services, educational programs, and healthy meals are widely available. These services are co-financed by the state and the municipalities, and the difference is covered by the parents according to their income brackets. The kindergarten is free of charge for the second or third child who is in kindergarten at the same time as his older sibling. Since the maintenance of children is a considerable financial challenge, parents are assisted in various ways to provide for their children. So we have a childbirth grant that is one-off cash benefit intended for the purchase of children's necessities. There is also a parental allowance that is paid to parents who have no parental protection insurance. Next to mention is the child benefit, that is an income supplement to have parents provide for the maintenance, upbringing, and education of their children. And in addition, parents of a child in need of special care and protection receive a special child care allowance, with some of them being entitled to partial payment for the loss of income and some additional relief. So large families with at least 3 children are also entitled to various types of allowances and relief. The important way the state can support families' well-being is also by funding accessible and good quality family support programs. So before I conclude, I would like to mention our network of regional family support programs and the network of multi-generational centers that are long-term free of charge and widely accessible programs for children, adolescents, and their families. They are based on modern concepts of support and self-help to strengthen the position of vulnerable families and contribute to the greater social inclusion of families and individuals. So having a well-developed and well-functioning family policy that addresses and supports children's and families' well-being and their various needs is the result of decades of systematic work, comprehensive planning, and collective effort. So this collective effort is also part of a wider effort to strengthen the welfare state. Progressive family policy, in our opinion, cannot and should not be separated from a wide range of progressive social policies directed at reducing poverty and social inequalities, be it wealth inequalities, income inequalities, or gender, or other types of inequalities. It should also not be separated from the progressive labor policies directed at improving the living and working conditions of the working people. So only a wide and ambitious set of such policies can generate the material conditions that enable each member of our society to create a family of his or her own. So receiving this award is an important encouragement for our efforts to improve the well-being of children and families and our determination to strengthen the welfare state. Thank you once again.
Congratulations to the awardees. We have our closing remarks by Ms. Renata Kaczmarska, who is the focal point of the family at the United Nations Division for Inclusive Social Development at the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Ms. Renata, you've got the floor. Thank you. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you so much to all the organizers of this event and all the participants. First of all, I'd like to thank very much Professor Joseph Żywac, and I have to pronounce his name correctly. Thank you. Being Polish myself. So, Professor Żywac, I'm really grateful for explaining family science to us, and especially the aspects that's very important about translational science. So that's driven by family science, because I think communication, explaining how family science can be useful to policymakers, this is really of utmost importance, and we've been talking about this for many, many decades, and we have to do more to translate family science better to the public and the policymakers. Family science is indeed more than we imagine, and I think we're all grateful for this fascinating presentation you offered. Thank you so much to all the young scholars. You really are doing a great job in your respective schools, and this is a hope we have that you can translate family science better in the future. And let me also thank for the question about SDGs, the lady in the back. And I just want to tell you, we have a lot of materials on our website, how family policies can contribute to the achievement of many SDGs, being in poverty reduction, in health, in education. We have a lot of family science research demonstrating that. So we really, family policies can help, and I wish that policymakers realize that better. And thank you for the other questions and the interest in this event. And congratulations to the recipients of the IPD Awards. Continue your good work. This is very inspiring for all of us. And in the conclusion, I would like to invite you to do all you can and continue doing what you can for family well-being in all your respective fields. And I hope we meet again, maybe to celebrate the International Day of Families on 15 May. And thank you so much for being part of the commission and being interested in family science. Thank you so much.